shirt. Whoever has a dove on, you have a dove on. Like, you kind of know it's Girl Up, so if you're, like, from afar, not really knowing what they're doing, they probably aren't Girl Up. And there's not a teen advisor in every club. Clubs are run by club leaders, so any of you can be a club president or however you want to set up your e-board. Each school is a little bit different in how they set it up. Yeah.
Follow, okay.
Yeah.
So there might be other clubs that are Girl Up, but they're not actually Girl Up?
No. Yeah, so that's what I was trying to get at, is that, like, you'll know when it's a Girl Up club. So whatever club you're kind of observing and you've seen they've had meetings, I'm guessing it's probably not Girl Up, because you would know.
And you can always, I mean, obviously, if you feel comfortable, you can just go up to them or go to a meeting and be like, hey, is this like UNF Girl Up, or is this like Girls on the Run or something? Because like there are a lot of similar organizations that work towards similar goals, but sometimes it just takes, you know, a simple question like, what's the deal?
What's your name?
What's the deal with Girl Up?
Yeah.
All right, so now we'll talk about our clubs.
Yeah. So I'm in college, like Anna said. I'm a rising junior. I'm studying political science with a concentration in IR, which is International Relations, at Binghamton University in Upstate New York. And I have a college club, but I also, because I live in Syracuse, whenever I'm home, I help mentor, well, not help, like I do mentor a club in inner city Syracuse at H.W. Smith, and a lot of the girls are actually here today, so I'm like super pumped.
They won an award.
They got an honorable mention. It was
pretty cool.
I got very excited. I was in the back like a mom, and I was so proud. I was like, yes, those are my girls. But so what I've done with that club is I go in, and I've been doing it for 2 years now, and we just have different conversations every single time, and we try to plan it out ahead of time. So the first time I met them, I came and gave a presentation about the Sustainable Development Goals. Do you girls know what those are?
SDGs.
SDGs, like the colored blocks.
They have them outside at the outside photo booth. Like they're those things that are like no world hunger.
Oh
like,
yeah, we went over those in geography.
Yep.
Oh, awesome! You learned
That's
about them in school. That's so cool. So my first exposure to them was getting to teach them about the UN and about the Sustainable Development Goals, and then introducing Girl Up to them. And they didn't have an e-board yet or anything. It was just like a group of girls at the school that wanted a like extracurricular activity, because this is interesting. At that school, they have a program called Building Men, and there's not an equivalent for girls. They had a Building Women program, but not in their school, and I will, even though this is being recorded, I will still talk about it. This is a program for Building Men. They weren't like really including the girls at all. They weren't having conversations about feminism or about gender equality or gender-based violence. They were attending marches and doing things, but there was never a conversation about girls. And so when they introduced the Building Women program, the girls were really excited because like, oh, what is this going to be? But they were 7th graders at the time, so they couldn't join. And the program wound up actually being like the girls at the end of the year would make ties for the boys, and they would like learn how to do interviews and like not really talking about things that like we care about and what girls care about. So when the girls were introduced to Girl Up, it was like so different from anything that their district has done that it was like a really exciting thing. So they've been doing a lot of like their self-run activities, but whenever I come in, like I help facilitate conversations and help their club advisors with like meeting ideas. So it's not because I'm away, it's not as hands-on as Anna's is going to be, but it's one way you can help facilitate.
Yeah,
yeah,
cool.
I think that's
so
good.
Now I'll talk a little bit, kind of from a different perspective of how you can help mentor a club, maybe in a more like Maureen was saying, direct, hands-on way. So because my younger sister went to the like public middle school affiliated with my public high school, it was really easy for me to get really directly involved. And since I was still a high school student last year, I actually came to meetings at the middle school after school. So one, I worked with the middle school administration and my younger sister to get a club officially set up there. And one of the principals, his name's Mr. Nardi, one of his, shout out Mr. Nardi, one of his stipulations, like one of his requirements in setting up a club at the middle school was that they had to have a high school student, at least one high school student, attend every meeting. So it was actually me and one of my high school club co-presidents. She's at the summit.
Hashtag commitment.
it's pretty cool. So the two of us would come every Wednesday after school, and we would help the girls run their meetings. And at the beginning of the year, we really were very directly hands-on. We would kind of plan the meetings and then have the girls involved, make sure they were involved in activities. But then the girls, the middle school girls, actually held their own elections. They elected people and really started planning activities and meetings there by themselves. And by the end of the year, it was really like Charlotte and I were just there to help the president of the club and the leaders within the middle school club, just to make sure everything was running smoothly, and that like when they did a bake sale, which was super awesome at the end of the year, that they had everything like double checked and dotted their I's and crossed their T's. So for me, I did attend every meeting, which is like a little bit different than Morgan, but even so, by the end of the year, by the end of our like relationship with the club, it was more hands off. It's really the girls doing a lot of their own work.
So you like acted as like the training wheels as they're learning to.
Yes, I was
Run
the
their
training
club.
wheels for the bicycle, the school cycle.
You should commit.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So those are our experiences, and when I was in high school, I also did something similar with starting one in my middle school. I think the Syracuse City School District one was definitely one of my favorite ones, because getting to meet all of the girls and watching them grow over the past 2 years has been really exciting. But we want to definitely make this interactive, and like, why did you come to this workshop? What do you want to know from us? Because we can talk at you, but we're never going to be able to answer if you don't ask.
So any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm kind of asking you, basically. So her lip.
Ooh.
So we have there's 4 of us who came from Chicago to like be here, and
Chicago Coalition.
2 of our, not my little sisters, but her little sister and one of our friends' little sisters are in the middle schools, and they wanted to come because like they've seen us like work really hard to start a club, and they want to start one at the middle school. And we always try to like give them ideas and like encourage them to start the club, and they never like jump on it.
Right.
But like we don't want to be like too hands-on and like do it for them, but like what's the best approach to like, because we know they want to do it, we're just not sure like how to lift them up to doing it.
No, that's a good question.
Sure.
That's a really good question. So I think it's a little bit hard, and obviously you guys know your siblings and friends' siblings better than I do, but with my sister, I think part of it is one, just like, after the summit, why don't you tell them about like really meaningful speakers, or maybe share a video or something where you're like, see how much this matters, or see how important this is. And I think ask them, what's holding them back, what's making them nervous. Like I know in my sister's case, it was having to go and talk to Mr. Nardi and get approval from a teacher to be her advisor. That's a big step, especially for, an 8th grade girl to go in, march into the principal's office and be like, I'm talking to Mr. Nardi now. Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't do that in 8th grade. So I think in that case, you might be like, for example, if the issue is something like that, you can be like, all right, how can I help you? So with my sister, I ended up, going in and talking to Mr. Nardi with her. Or we like sent Mr. Nardi an email together. If it's something else, maybe they're worried they don't have enough friends to join or like start the club, and be like, we'll come to your club. Like, I don't know, we'll find you friends. So I think just talk to them and see what's like holding them back from like jumping in.
Yeah. And I feel like when we get emails to the community, and when I do talk to middle school girls, it's always that fear that like no one's gonna show up. Like it's always like, and even like college clubs, I know we always have that like, okay, we're gonna put ourselves out there, we're gonna organize this event. What if no one comes? And then you're just so scared, and you're like sitting there. It's like 7:58. It starts at 8 o'clock, and you're like, okay, the door's open soon, and like you're just so nervous. But I think the thing is like you definitely have to. Welcome. So you definitely have to be able to like step outside that comfort zone and like yourself as a leader. That way you can guide the middle schoolers through that, because I feel like that's always one too, is like they're so nervous, and if you can like, even if you're nervous yourself and you're like, wow, like maybe this bake sale won't.
Maybe Mr. Nardi is really scary.
Yeah, maybe Mr. Nardi is scary, maybe this bake sale no one's gonna come to. Like those things, like I think as a mentor, that's where you have to like kind of like throw those fears to the back seat and just be like, we're going, like this is what we're doing, because they're going to lead. You're going to lead by example, and they'll follow, and then eventually they're going to do the same thing. They'll mimic what you're doing.
Yeah. It's so incredible, really. I think my biggest reason why I think you guys should all think really seriously about mentoring a club is just like what you get out of it. Like really watching these girls grow is so incredible to me. I'm gonna rib Sophie for a little bit here. So Sophie was super great. I had known her she went to my elementary school, and it was super awesome. And I had known her, it's really sweet. But
like kindergarten.
yeah, whatever.
Oh
But
my God.
so I'd known Sophie for a while, and that was really incredible, and I was so glad to hear she was joining the club. But seeing Sophie really step up as a leader, and then getting an email from her over the summer, like, are there any spots left at the leadership summit? Like, I really want to go. And just watching her grow has been so incredible. And you get some stuff back from it too. Like, now I know like how to manage like certain issues is the wrong word. I know how to manage certain dynamics at my high school club because I've seen the middle school girls deal with it, and I've helped the middle school girls navigate it.
It's definitely something, like, I know you're not on LinkedIn yet, but, like, you can definitely add it to your LinkedIn, right? You're going to be a manager of all of these girls, and you're going to become a professional at being able to, like, you know, the icing is melting and the girls are freaking out, and like you're gonna be able to think quickly on your feet and fix that situation. And like that type of management and leadership style, although it may seem small and it's like those small things where like, oh yeah, no problem, like I got it, I'm a leader, like those things are really important and those build great leaders and it makes you awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. Yes, Sophie.
So,
So it's my
Alright, so I know like our club, it had been started but then it was shut down because people weren't that interested in it. So then, at Pyle.
Yeah.
So then,
No, this was after I left. It got shut down. This is what you mean, right? So
Right.
like, basically, I went to Pyle a wee long time ago, and after I left, when I graduated in 8th grade, we didn't really have the infrastructure set up to continue the club. And so this is what Sophie's talking about. When I left, it shut down, but then it was restarted.
so how, like now that I'm going to high school, how can I make sure that that club is still running? Like what can I do to make sure that the girls in Pyle are still able to have that experience?
That's a really good question. And so I think it comes from sort of two different angles. So one, it comes from, so as me, since I'm also graduating, it comes from making sure that the people who are going to be leading the club, the Whitman Club next year, still understand that we have this really close relationship with Pyle. And, you know, they need to stay connected, talk to Mr. Nardi, talk to, you know, the people who are still in the Pyle Club and say, you know, let's keep this going. We got it going last year. We really had, you know, a strong start. Let's keep it going. And on the other hand, it really comes from people like you, Sophie, who have just left the Pyle Club, making sure that you keep those contacts. And, you know, you were in 8th grade last year, but people who are in 7th grade, now going into 8th grade, making sure you're like, hey, you know, Talia, make sure the club's still going. Or Talia, why don't you talk to Mr. Nardi? I can help you. And I think it's kind of cool, this like natural progression. Words are hard, but this natural progression, watching girls like in middle school, from the beginning of middle school, move on to high school and become leaders, and then going back to help their middle school. It's awesome.
Yeah, and like the same thing happened with my club as well. Like I was so nervous, like leaving high school, that like everything was just gonna stop working. And I've been graduated from high school for 2 years now. Yeah, going on 3 years. And so like going back and like they'll send me invites to homecoming, and like I can't make it, but like because I'm in class, but like they're still marching in their parades, they're doing these traditions. And so one of the things that's really great about mentoring is that like you're going to be a part of like a beginning of something, and it's going to live like on past you, as long as you're very like critical and like thinking very critically about the steps that you're taking to build that infrastructure, and making sure that like, okay, here's the leader book that we have internally. Like you have your Girl Up leader book, and that has all the facts that you need, facts and figures, and your donation number for the 501c3 that businesses always ask for. But the thing is like you're going to create all these documents, all of these routines for certain fundraisers that like only you'll know, and so you'll have to be able to like compile that and like give it on to the next club. And then you can also do that with like a middle school club as well, and so it keeps building past you.
I saw your hand last. The second time.
Okay, so my sister is running the middle school club that I started next year. And so I'm really interested in like having the high school be involved with the middle school club, but I don't want her to feel like we're like micromanaging and like don't trust her to lead it herself. Like how can we mentor her?
I feel like Anna's the perfect person for that question.
Well, funny you should ask. Yeah, so that's definitely something really hard, and it's something that you have to be careful for, because also I feel like with middle school girls, and something that I noticed with our club is at the beginning when we came in, we're like, we're the leaders, we're the high school leaders, and like you will listen, like girls feel like that's just another class,
Like,
and they've just come out from out of school, right? They don't want to sit in like another 45 minutes of someone who's older than them, you know, yammering on and on.
Great, you know a lot, you're in
Yeah.
high school, okay.
It's like they don't want that. So I think what it really comes from is you might have to use like a bit of a heavier hand at the beginning, but it can be something as simple as, talking to your sister, and since she's already running the club, which is awesome, being like, hey, would you guys want to collaborate on a fundraiser? Maybe it's something like a bake sale. We did like an ice skating fundraiser that we invited like the older girls to, and the younger girls came. And not, besides the whole like collaborating so you help them plan it, it's a really great way to bond these high school girls with middle school girls, which I really appreciated too, is that like now they have like role models and mentors, not only in Girl Up, but people who have like been through high school and been through middle school too, and like know how much, that biology class sucks, and like know, what it's like to be you. Yeah, so if that helps.
Yeah. Okay. You're all gonna get a chance to.
She can go first since I've already said something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow. So nice.
Thank you.
I started a club at my middle school with my friend a long time ago, and so I graduated from middle school like 2 years ago, and I'm going into my junior year of high school. And last year, or like 2 years ago, when I was a freshman year, like the club was running really well at the middle school, but then I'm pretty sure it's like gone now. So like, what would be the first step to like rejuvenating it? I guess.
Yeah. So Morgan probably can speak to this too, and I think probably the reason that happened is because when you think about it, middle school is only 3 years long. So when you're in 8th grade and you inspire, you like totally, these 6th graders are so excited, that's awesome, but 2 years later, they're already gone. And so it's really this like commitment to making sure that every single year you're kind of going back and being like, how's the club running? And maybe it takes, going to a meeting and stepping in, being like, is there someone here who's gonna be able to keep this going next year? And I think if you're going back, it might take a little bit of sleuthing. I was really lucky that I had a younger sister who already went to the middle school, but maybe you have a family friend, right? Maybe you have, a friend's younger sibling who's at the middle school right now that you can reach out to. I don't know if you...
Yeah, and I also think, that'd be great if it just like fell over and be like, surprise! Also effects. Bad jokes and voices, and
wow.
I can do a bad Donald Duck impression later. So I also think also building it into your high school club now, that this is something that your high school club does. That way that it lives on past you, because like you're going to probably go back and do all this hard work, and then you'll be in college and be like, oh, I wonder what's happening, and like then you're like, why did I do it? Yeah. It's like it may disengage again, right? And so making sure that you're like building connections with teachers or mentors, and really like Anna said, sleuthing, and if you got a Facebook stalk, do some Facebook stalking.
Or
you know
Insta
what I mean?
stalk, or Snapchat stalk.
Yeah, because I found
whatever
out,
you youths are into.
Yeah, because I found out a lot of you aren't on Facebook. I felt really old.
I
So
feel old.
great. But like whatever you have to do, don't be afraid to reach out to younger girls, because younger girls love to like be like, oh, you want to know what happened? And they'll tell you what happened. Like they're like, the principal? No, he shut it down. And you could be like, oh, okay, well I can write an email and throw the Girl Up logo at the bottom and like be very official. And I can like say, well, I was the president this year and I'm doing this now, and I would love to mentor the girls. And so really like trying to figure out what's happening and like applying yourself to like help those girls, and then also like being that mediator for the staff as well, because sometimes the staff will be like, oh great, like we have this one 8th grader that's like super charged up and ready to go, but like once you leave, they're like, oh, I don't have that energy she did. Yeah. I guess the club's gone. Like, so you just gotta find that like rhythm. Hopefully that answered it.
And also, just touching on that really quickly, another idea is just at the beginning of every year, and Sophie doesn't know we're doing this yet this year.
Surprise!
So right before school begins, something that I'm starting this year at my club is we have one older member of the high school club, so like me, because I just graduated. People coming into the high school club, so that would be Sophie, for example, and then people who are still at the middle school club, and we're gonna meet at Starbucks, surprise.
Oh, that's
Surprise, and get like fun drinks or whatever, but then talk through the year and be like, okay, let's talk about how we're gonna keep this club sustaining, and just even if it's like once a semester, even if it's only once a year, just meeting up and being like, let's talk through this and make sure that for this upcoming year, we're gonna have some sort of plan of accountability, checking in with each other, and making sure this is still working.
Yeah, and like, not because I'm trying to micromanage that, but like part of that plan is definitely going to be like on Google Drive, like in a shared folder, written down, because documentation is so important when it comes to these things, because like I know, okay, so I was president of my high school when I was a senior, and like I just remember being so frustrated my senior year because I wanted to find something for student council and there was nothing written down. And I think that was my first time being like, why don't people document things? And like just getting so mad, like I just couldn't do anything. So I made a binder, and like that's something I mentioned earlier. So if it wasn't like you're like, make a binder, what is she talking about? So like definitely like writing down all of your fundraisers and like it stinks, but like writing down the instructions, because like people are going to want to mimic like your traditions and like what you're doing, but that's going to leave with you once you go. And so if you're able to do that, like they're gonna be like, wow, this is so easy, I know what I'm doing, let's keep this tradition going.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, any questions? Yeah.
Also about that, just like really quick, this is not my question, but like my club this year, because we have like some people leaving and we have like our new freshmen coming in, and like the club started my freshman year, but it's like just starting. So binders, because my student government does it, and it's like kind of problematic if you're not like good at it. No, it's like good. But so we're starting this year like on, obviously we have like our club email, like a Google Drive like folder.
Yeah.
Because then it's like online, so you always have it. And so if any, like we have new club leaders and leadership, so we share it with them, and then they can have it if you want. Like,
Future is now, my friends.
But that's not my question.
Okay, go ahead.
That shows how old I am. I was like printed out.
Wait,
put it
she
in a
also had a
binder.
question.
Oh, you did? It's like print it out, put it in a binder. She's like, no. Sorry.
So my question is, like, when you guys did like the meetings in the middle school when it first started, what activities did you do? Because like I've been thinking about it for a while, and I don't want to just push and be like, okay, guys, you're doing a fundraiser, like start planning.
Right.
I like don't know if we should
okay,
like
sure.
shape, like a
So
youth group.
I started with like a lot of introduction to the issues, because for a lot of these girls, like they have no sort of exposure to like child marriage or the lack of education that girls are getting. So I started with an exposure to the issues, and what the Girl Up website has is a lot of toolkits with like easy videos, easy PowerPoint presentations that you can kind of start out with. And then something else that I really recommend that we did for most of the entire year. I'm worried like Sophie's gonna like expose my bad leadership to this.
She's like, actually, Anna, we didn't do that.
Yeah, but it's something that I really enjoyed, and then the girls took over that I thought was really good, is every week we did something called Girl of the Week. And we picked a girl to highlight who was like, like Malala was one week, and then we picked people who were maybe like slightly lesser known. We did Victoria Justice one week, and
she has a Girl Up.
She was a Girl Up. She does have a Girl Up song. But
it's great.
Basically what we did is we picked a girl of the week. We would talk about them for 15 minutes, and it was a way for the girls to really relate, because especially when we started out, we picked people like Victoria Justice and like Monique Coleman, and people that they knew and recognized, and then talked about like the amazing work they were doing for feminism. It was something where it was like, oh, like I like this person, like maybe I like this club. And then what was so incredible to me is as we got halfway through the year, it was suddenly the girls, like the middle school girls, who were like, can we do this person for Girl of the Week? Or like, can I present Girl of the Week? And I was like, yeah, you can present Girl of the Week. So I think that's like, it's small, but it's something that you can like definitely incorporate into meetings, which I thought was really helpful.
Yeah, and so because I'm interning with Girl Up this summer, I have to go to this girls camp called Girls Up, and it's like a DMV like summer camp. And one of the things I do with them, and it's always middle school girls, is we have the toolkit online too, and the resources is a walk in her shoes, and it's a little flip book to kind of like that first exposure, like giving a name and a face to different obstacles that girls face. And it's like, the activity, it's like take a step forward if you relate to. So it's kind of like that way it's like that physical, like I'm walking forward and now I'm this girl, and that's always really impactful. So there's so many different ways you can slowly expose them, but it's really good to keep in mind, like Anna said, like typically this is their first exposure to child marriage. If you talk about FGM, just like depending on what you're introducing them to, this will be the first time typically, unless they've talked about it in social studies. So like you definitely have to be able to like gauge how they're learning it and if they truly understand, and that's a huge leadership aspect of it, is like making sure that you are responsibly teaching them.
Definitely.
Those.
And also, something to bring up is that like a bunch of you guys are in middle school, you're all very educated, like responsible women, but a lot of times, especially if you're mentoring an elementary school club or a middle school club with some younger people, you might have to think really carefully about what you show them. So like at our club, I made sure that I watched every single video all the way through for like language or anything that I thought was like too graphic or perhaps like a little bit too intense for some of the younger kids in the club.
And that goes for reading things completely through, like I know sometimes like in high school I'd be like, okay, I'm tired, like, but you have to, and like, you're doing everything, right? You're playing a sport as well, but making sure you take that extra time to really vet everything you're showing and reading, because your thorough understanding of the material you're presenting will definitely affect the way that they're learning it as well. So you're, like we talked about earlier, that like leadership where you power through it, if you're able to really digest the knowledge before you're teaching somebody else what you're teaching them, words, like they're going to better absorb it. And they'll really see your passion through it as well. So really thinking out those lesson plans in the beginning, I guess, is the overarching theme to that. Yeah. Question? Yes.
How do you like suggest like we like tell people at our school, like, because when I first heard about the Girl Up program, because someone from, I didn't even know what Girl Up was.
Yeah.
When I first got to middle school, but a person from another middle school that I was friends with told me about Girl Up and that she's in it, and then I looked for it at my school, but like I had to look really hard, like on Snapchat and on the school like
Features
posters,
now.
and like I think like, how do you think my school should go about like putting our stuff on like social media, because like it's no one knows about the Girl Up Club. So, like,
Sure thing. So actually, you're talking to the social media panelist from last year.
Anna is an expert.
Okay, so
That whip is
yeah, that was pretty bad. All right. Okay, so what I was gonna say is social media, especially for those of you who are in middle school and to some extent high school, is like one of the best ways to reach people. Because I'm sure a lot of you guys put up posters in your school, and I definitely do that too. But let's be honest, raise your hand if you've seen a poster in your school and then been like, now I'm compelled to go to that event. Like, okay, so some of you.
Older than everyone else, though.
Yeah, see that's really great. I'm glad that your poster has convinced you, but like I didn't find that just putting posters up was really convincing anyone. So for those of you who are on Facebook groups are your best friend. I know that doesn't apply to everyone, but just adding people, that way they get constant notifications every time you're like, remember, events tomorrow, remember, free food, remember.
Yeah.
That's really great. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, Instagram and Snapchat are really, really awesome. Instagram, since you have like the ability to post unlimited captions, you can be like, you know, our first meeting is tomorrow. Stop by and get a free cookie. And then people are like, free cookie, like, that's awesome.
Cookie emoji, cookie emoji,
Cookie emoji. And just then that way also with Snapchat and Instagram, you can share photos of what your club's doing. And that's how people get invested. And that's how people are like, wow, that looks really awesome. You know, they went to a bake sale, or, you know, they went to the leadership summit and met Cara. Like, that's crazy. That's so incredible. That's when people get interested, because they see these photos of what you're doing. And for those of you who are in middle school, like, even as someone going into college, I know almost every single one of my friends is on Instagram. So it's definitely a really easy way where people are just scrolling through their feeds and they're like,
and like really utilizing like the stories, because I know like in college, like if you're on Facebook, how many of you are actually on Facebook? Okay, a good half. That's all right. Fair. All the older girls. Okay, I'm getting old. So Facebook has stories as well, but Instagram stories and like obviously Snapchat, like just to like really emphasize like this is what we're doing right now. And if you go live, it's like come find this pizza, come find the Starbucks drink, whatever. Like those girls and boys for that club are going to like bolt. They'll be there. Yeah.
so yeah, I vote social media.
Yeah, definitely like make stuff on Canva. Canva's pretty great. Okay, other questions? I promised to bring next. Okay, I'm sorry.
Ah, jeez.
Oh, jeez. Let's go to
After
Bill.
you start a club and everything, like, how do you assign them jobs, like the people joining?
Good question.
Okay, so I think if you're gonna start it with a friend, having a conversation with that friend about like how you want the e-board to look, I think that's always a touchy subject. And being like, okay, are we both gonna be presidents?
Okay, so that's a good question. Morgan uses the word e-board. That's the Girl Up community. For those of you who don't know what the e-board is, that's the Girl Up community.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
E-board means executive board.
Yeah, the Girl Up community. So that's where
Which
you post like
consists-
president is, vice
Yeah.
president is, treasurer is.
Yeah,
That's
so it's
the
like
e-board.
president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, and historian.
we don't have historian, but that's like, you can include it. It's
Yeah,
cool.
like so e-boards, like you can definitely Google it. There are so many different ways you can set them up. So you could be like co-presidents, you could be president, vice president, like whatever feels best. So like I know I started my club on my own, so I was kind of like, I'm gonna be president, so here's all everybody else is gonna join. But like I'm being honest. But like that's how it starts, right? So if you're starting like your first club, like you said, you're starting a club, right? How you sign the rules?
Or you're helping mentor.
You're helping
Which one?
mentor.
I mean, we started it, but I don't think we went like deep into it.
Okay,
Yeah.
good to
So
know.
like whoever like having that conversation with the other people that you started with, like I feel best about all the roles are on the Girl Up community. The president does X, Y, and Z, and then some. The vice president does X, Y, and Z, and whatever. And so going through those roles and having an honest conversation, and middle school girls are very capable of that. So you don't have to like stress out too much, but definitely know that like when you're having those conversations, if you're first starting a middle school club, hopefully otherwise it's institutionalized how they're running their elections, but having those conversations about like, okay, maybe you and these 4 girls started the club together in the middle school, and so feels very passionate about being president, and making sure like it's an open dialogue, because when you don't have enough people to vote, it's a little difficult. So it's just knowing how to have that conversation. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, I would agree. And I also think definitely when it comes with the dialogue, like in most scenarios, I feel like when you start a middle school club, you're probably working pretty closely with one student who feels really, really passionate about it. Not necessarily always, but I know like with my sister, it was like Grace, and then Sophie kind of like got really passionate about it too. And so when you have elections, it definitely is evident to middle school girls and elementary school girls, like they totally get it that like the person who like really wants the position and like seems to know what's going on. So like we did elections, and I think it worked out well. Yeah, you missed elections, but Grace, it worked out well. I don't know. We had a good one.
It's going to just depend on where the club is. So if you're coming into helping mentor one that's like already have been running for a while, you won't have to like institute those elections. But otherwise, it's like, okay, here are the girls that like really started it, and here are the girls like the second semester. Now we have more, and we can vote on the elections for next year. So you just have to kind of feel that out. But it's all in the club leader book. Yay!
Yep. All right, you've been raising your hand for a while.
Alright. First up, I got a little funny story for you guys.
Oh, let's hear it.
I came in here and I thought it was the Start a New Club, Rev and Rise Up, and I was so confused because you guys were talking about mentoring, and I'm like, yeah, this is a appointment. I was like, what?
Oh shoot.
I was finding some
It's
of
a
this out
comedy club.
afterwards. But since now I have to like reorder my questions in my head.
Right. Okay.
So
That's
like
okay.
I'm going to be like starting my first new club this year, and I don't want it to like die after I graduate high school. So I'm wondering like how should I address this? Also, I'm not really starting it in my high school. I'm more doing it like a citywide one.
Your community one. Yeah. So I know that we talked about this a little bit the other day as well. Girl Up clubs can also be run out of the home and like in your community or your faith-based organization that you may be a part of, and you can tap into different things. So for you, I would say that it's going to be a little bit different in the sense that you might not meet as frequently just because you're going to be not after school. And I would strongly suggest like finding a consistent place to meet. So either if it's your living room, like Celia did, Celia Buckman, who is a TA 2014-2015 and co-chair 15-16, she ran it out of her living room in Chicago and then helped build clubs in the Chicago area. And so you could do it that way, or you could meet in a library. Like libraries typically have rooms you can rent, or in a Starbucks, rec centers, boys and girl clubs. There are so many places that you can like rent, as in like just borrow the space for like a little bit, obviously contacting the building, and they won't typically charge you. And then like working with other nonprofits. So yours is probably gonna look a little different, but you can definitely reach out to middle schools and be like, hey, we're having this event at the Boys and Girls Club, and here's our meeting time, and like they can post it on their bulletin board, but also like if you know girls in that school, having them repost things on Instagram or putting it on their Snapchat story or Instagram story, and like really reaching out to them. So it's gonna look a little different, but it doesn't mean you can't do all the same things.
Alright. Yeah. Oh, good. My brain's probably still working. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay,
so you said you started a coalition.
Yeah.
I'm from Puerto Rico, and there's there's like no clubs there. So how can I start a Puerto Rico coalition?
Yeah, so yeah, that's awesome. So I think it takes knowing really dedicated people. So I didn't know, like, so this is how it happened. So the first club that I helped start, it was like, I went to a couple of meetings for different like organizations in the area and just being like, hey, do you know any cool teens? And they were
That's
like,
how you find friends.
I'm really good at making friends. So I would be like, hey, do you know any teens that are interested in women's rights and for girls' rights and advocacy? And like give out, I had a business card, like very nerdy. Here is my business card, or you can write down on paper. And I got connected to Deanna, who also took Girl Up with her to college too. And then going into like neighboring schools, so where I grew up, like all the high schools were really like tight knit. So I helped start one, like these names won't mean anything to you, but like at Union Endicott and at Vestal and Binghamton and then Whitney Point, like all these clubs started popping up because I would like Facebook stalk the one girl that I was like, hey, she would be really passionate about this. And like, although it sounds really silly and like kind of probably weird, but like, like, you know, like who's going to be passionate about it, and you can be like, hey, have you seen Girl Up? Because honestly, that's how I found out about Girl Up, was someone like saw potential in me, and they were like, hey, have you ever heard about this? I was like, wow, I'm so interested in this. And so just being that person to introduce that one girl. And if not, I went and talked to other schools, and I still go to colleges and like younger schools, and I like come on in and I'm like, here I am, and I like bring pamphlets with me, and Girl Up will, if you reach out to them, they'll send you wristbands and stuff, and you can like bribe them to come. Like,
and also just like even on a similar note, if your club has an event and you just like make the effort to invite, like, okay, we're gonna invite 5 people from every neighboring school. Or we want to make sure that we invite, at least 20 people who aren't already members of the club or members of our school community. That's how you get people who might be interested, like, just kind of hooked. And then maybe you, like, come up to them at the event, like, hey.
I heard you're, and they're like, how'd you,
like,
how'd you know? And you're like, I could just feel it.
I could just know.
But, like, also, like, going to, like, for at least my high school, like, football games were, like, a big thing. And so, like, knowing that, like, having, like, pamphlets, and, like, my younger sister, like, knew a lot of people from different schools too, so she was able to like pass on information and like go to the other side of the football to like the other football like stadium and be like, here you go. And they're like, why are you here and doing that?
Okay, I saw a hand, yes?
What's the first step into starting your own club besides getting permission from administration and finding a place?
Good question. So the Girl Up official way that you're supposed to start a club, when you register it, is they ask if you have 5 people who are already members of the club, so like you and 4 of your friends, you register the club and you have to have an adult advisor. And that's probably something you're going to need to get your administrator's approval anyways, is that you have an advisor there, someone who's going to sit in on meetings or at least be responsible. Like if your club, like, I don't know, like trashes the school, they have someone to be like, please don't do that again. So that's really crucial. But I think the first step, once you have those 5 people, is you really want to advertise before you get to your first meeting. So at my school, I know we have a clubs night, and like we were talking, and even if your school doesn't, like we were talking about before, the power of Snapchat and Instagram among your guys' friend groups, and even Facebook, for those of you geezers who still use it, is really powerful. So posting that and saying, this is our first meeting, you're, telling all of your friends, telling your friends to tell their friends, and then once you have that first meeting and you register the club officially, then I'd say you could consider yourself a club.
Yeah, and just making sure like you're on the Girl Up community and making all of your like e-board at minimum join, just so like Girl Up, because in the office, although it seems very like odd, like you join this website and then like people know you exist in the office and they're like, oh my gosh, how's that club doing? And like we'll reach out to you and like we want to know about it, so like we want you to post status updates, we want to see photos from your events, and so like really taking a lot of photos and uploading them online and being active, you'll get so much feedback from the Girl Up staff because like we love to see it. It's like we're like, oh my gosh, did you see what they did? They turned this on the ground with chalk, and we're just like blown away. So that's like another important aspect of it as well.
All right, cool. Any more questions? Anybody? I don't know when this ends.
I think
it sounds like there's people in the hallway, but
yeah, there's people waiting.
but I don't know if they're waiting for us. I don't know. Do we have waiters?
Yeah, they are. They're waiting outside.
Wow, guys.
Wow.
You know, just tell your friends. This was such an incredible session. Really incredible. All right, bye guys. Mentor Club. It's really worth it.
Do it. If you have questions, come up and ask us. Bye-bye. I'm falling.